it's beautiful to be a purist if you're a purist in the intention that was set for that method, not in a rigidity that doesn't allow for the development of your child. That's where it gets to be such a hot mess.
Yes. Well, and also
like you said, rigidity. That's a good word for what it can be.
Welcome to the Homeschool Perspective, where seasoned homeschooling moms share tips, insights, and resources to empower your homeschool journey. Hey there, friends, and welcome back to the Homeschool Perspective. Today, we're tackling a question that many homeschool families grapple with. Do you need to declare a homeschooling method or style to be successful? So it seems to be the first question that homeschoolers ask each other. Are you classical? Are you an unschooler? Do you do Montessori? So we're going to break it all down for you in this episode. What exactly are the homeschool methods? Do you really have to choose one? And how on earth do you figure out which method aligns with your family's unique vibe? But that's not all. What happens if you try a method and it turns out to be a total disaster for you and your kids? Or what if the only homeschool community around you is committed to a certain method that just doesn't vibe with you? We're here to explore all of these questions. We're going to share some laughs and hopefully make your homeschooling journey a bit easier and a lot more fun. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, get cozy, and let's dive into the wonderful, sometimes wacky world of homeschooling methods. All right, guys, this is going to be quite the topic. Should we start maybe by just kind of going over what some of these methods are, what we mean by when we say homeschool methods? You guys want to start there?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I love that just before we started this, Rachel was like, is it methods or style? And I think that word gets used interchangeably when we're talking about this. It's really having an overall philosophy that you're following. And it's usually when someone's talking about a homeschool method or a homeschool style, it's a philosophy that's been determined by another source, right? So, something like Montessori, Waldorf, unschooling, unit studies. My favorite one, eclectic, which means you pull a little from each, right? Is that a good definition?
Yeah.
Yes, classical.
Yeah, and I think Charlotte Mason, classical, unschool, those would be the ones that have
the core.
Yeah, well, the ones that have like the diehard purist followers, I feel like too. I mean, it's true. Like unit studies. Those people are more chill. Eclectic, you're more chill because you're gathering. Well, here's why. Because you're gathering from a lot of different sources. Charlotte Mason, classical, and unschooling are really a philosophy of education, or what they believe like core at the core of those of the educational philosophy, right?
They all have a lifestyle component too. So I'm thinking like Waldorf, Montessori, like even to the way your home is decorated. Mm-hmm. You don't have to take it this far. And I think we're going to talk more about purists later, but you don't have to, but it all of them do have a lifestyle, like literally the way your home looks, the way your homeschool area is set up, the activities that you participate in. I mean, they encompass so much.
Yeah.
It's funny. They scared me when I started homeschooling.
Yeah. I thought this was something I had to have like nailed down.
Right?
Nailed
yes.
down. Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, okay, so I filed our intent to homeschool, and then people are like, okay, but what method are you using? And I legit wondered if I had to file that too. And I went and I read a couple of really excellent books that helped me figure out where we were going to start and what we were going to do. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because I met all of these amazing people, but the classical people were a little bit scary. I was totally intimidated by their passion and their fervor. And then I met these Charlotte Mason purists, and I loved the idea of it, like rich books and living books, but I didn't necessarily agree with everybody on the definition of twaddle. Right. And I was like, okay. And then I was, explaining to another homeschooling mom kind of how we were rolling. She's like, oh, so you're Montessori. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. Right. Like, so I had all these introductions in the beginning, and it was so overwhelming. And I finally was like, I'm just going to stop talking to people and do it. And that was where we found our groove.
Yeah.
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 I think that's so. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask how you got started. Like, what did you start by researching methods like Lisa did, or did you do something else?
That's a good question. I always knew I was going to, we've established that. I've always known I was going to homeschool my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So reading about the different methods and philosophies was something I did. Don't laugh at me, but it's something I did.
Before you even had kids.
Even earlier.
Before you were married.
While she was homeschooling.
Even earlier. It's something I did like high school, early college. Like,
of course you did. This does not surprise me.
So my dissertation, like my big paper, right? My thesis for my degree ended up being about the integration of play into educational philosophies. So awesome. It's always been and it was about leadership. So how the integration of play into educational philosophies actually builds stronger leaders. So this has just been an area that's always interested me. And so I've studied, I'm not going to say all of them because there's new things all the time, but I've studied many of them, and I have for a long period of time. And one thing that I find really interesting that I see as like a common thread that goes throughout all of these different philosophies is that it's about developing the child as a person. Even though they go about it in different ways, at the root of these philosophies that I feel like have been most embraced by homeschooling communities, it is about developing the child as a human being, as a person, which I just find really interesting. But I totally get the thought that you have to file that information because people are very, they're very
it's the first thing. It's the first thing people ask.
And here's the crazy thing, because I can see what I would do. Like, I personally love the classical style. I love memorizing things. I love a clear path. I love order. But you know what? My kids didn't gel with it. It didn't serve them best. So now you get this interesting dance of doing what works for you as a homeschooling mom, but also serving your kids and their learning styles and their goals well. Right? You know, and it was funny. I had this conversation with someone the other day who was like, my kid just loves poetry and they like words and they want to learn, but I want them to learn a trade. And I'm like, okay, but maybe they're going to be an English teacher. You know what I mean? Like sit down and talk with them. And they're like, but they're only like 12. And I'm like, my adult kids were super clear by that age, not exactly what it would look like, but definitely the path and the course and how they would learn. And what I love about all these styles, and I don't know how true this is for everybody, but because we have so many kids, I think we're seeing it play out, is that we actually have multiple, like we're eclectic in the sense that we have multiple styles at play, but not all for the same kid. Like I have one kid I raised totally Charlotte Mason. And we like, I love Charlotte Mason. I love books. It's like my favorite, you know what I mean? Like this is like the coolest lifestyle, but other kids that just were really not unschoolers, because I'm way too structured for unschooling, but my unstructured version of unschooling, like here's your books, here's your core stuff. Now you get to pick the electives and kind of follow your fancy.
Yeah.
And they did, you know, I love that there are so many options and there's not a right one.
Yeah. I think that's a really important distinction too, is that there's not a right one. And, you know, as homeschool parents, we can appreciate that about each other, that everybody does homeschool with a different style, different personalities from mom or the parent that's homeschooling and the kids that are being schooled. Because I started with just a deep love for Charlotte Mason, and I just wanted to go all in on that. I thought it was great. But my kids didn't sit still, and you can't, I mean, even all of the like the tricks, you know, where you have Play-Doh and you have Legos and you have, you know, things for keep their hands busy so they can listen to all these beautiful, rich read alouds and all of these stories and all of this, you know, literature-based stuff. It didn't work. Like it wasn't the right time with the right group of kids. And so I started to adjust and bring in different strategies. I had somewhere where I wanted to start. And I think this is, I don't know if you guys found this and if our listeners, if you found this as well, but like you find something that you are interested in and you kind of start there. And then you just slowly start to find your groove. So it's like we started like, oh yeah, we're Charlotte Mason. But then it was like, oh, well, I love the classical of this. And so I'm going to pull that in, and, oh, I love the units. I want to do this unit study. Well, now, we're doing unit studies, and like, I loved everything on the floor, like eye level for the kids, all of the Montessori stuff too, like where they can grab and they can explore. Also, now we're doing some Montessori. So it's like all of these little things came in based on the personality of my kids, based on what they needed, based on what was working. And before I knew it, I had a very eclectic sort of homeschool. And then I embraced it. It took my kids showing me what they needed and what worked best for them. I have one kid who does like unschooling in his free time. He's just learning all the time. And, so we've got all of this stuff going on. But then once I embraced it, I felt like that was when we really found our groove. When I embraced that, it wasn't going to just be one way or the highway. Like, we're not doing it right if we don't follow somebody else's method.
I do feel like everyone can benefit. I think the majority of homeschoolers end up exactly where you're talking about, where you end up in some sort of eclectic state. Not everyone, but I would say the vast majority do. But I think this is where there is a benefit to learning about each of the different styles. Because if you don't have that frame of reference, especially if you don't feel super confident in education in general, the more you know and understand about the different styles, the more tools you have to pull from, the more things you can try out. I don't know that you have to do that, but I do think that it can be helpful to just add more like tools to your toolbox. But as you guys are talking, so I'm a huge proponent of bringing my kids in. We talk about things, I get their opinions. But something I often hear, and something that I even wrestle with a little bit, is the idea of training our children's affections. And that, have you heard that? You haven't heard that before, Lisa? So the idea that, and this is woven into classical, it's woven into Charlotte Mason, it's woven into Waldorf, I'll say primarily, but it's essentially this idea that children, that are like internal nature has a desire for like things that are true, good, and beautiful, or things that are, but that we live in worlds and cultures that detract from that. And so unschoolers are about to cringe and want to throw something at me, but
hang tight.
Hang tight. Let me get through. I promise. But the idea of following simply what our child's desire is can prevent them from getting exposure and like getting to that deeper part of their soul, because of the culture we live in and how watered down it is. And so I hear people talk about that sometimes, because it's like, well, how do you know then if the method that you love so much doesn't work for your family, or if it's something that your children aren't accustomed to and that you want? Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like this is a conversation that I hear, because we do live in a very watered down world right now, especially when it comes to richness. Like I like with gritted teeth, the whole twaddle thing. If you haven't heard the term twaddle means so twaddle means something. So the actual definition that Charlotte Mason talks about, okay, purists out there, I don't have the book in front of me. I'm paraphrasing, but it's the idea that a book is something that is talking down to a child, that isn't using rich, wonderful language, and is not presenting ideas for them to chew on and discern and do that. That has turned into, for a lot of people, like anything that's modern or like silly looking or things like that, things that are very attractive to children, things that marketing researchers have spent decades figuring out how, if they put this in front of a child, everything inside of them is going to get excited and grab it. I very, very reluctantly, my dyslexic, dyscalculia, auditory processing kiddo, very, very reluctantly, like I felt so much stress over it. Let him start reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And it was something that I felt like, I don't want him exposed to this. Like, there's gross potty humor in it. There's all kinds, like, this is a way. It lit a fire inside of him for reading. And now he's reading King Arthur. So it's like,
we had to
there's so many components to this. I know. And
I was so embarrassed.
Yes. And that's where it's like, there can be such a double-edged sword here, right?
I'm such a rebel. I was not embarrassed. I'm like, listen, you know, I don't engage in Facebook arguments and things like that, but there were times that I wanted to because of just the discussion around twaddle and just like how this, you know, I would never let that, you know, Beverly Cleary was one that I just like was like really like on because like these are the books that like really, like you said, light a fire in kids. And there, you know, I think there is, you know, some discernment that has to be had for the types of books that your kids are reading and stuff that your kids are getting into. But if it's going to spark an interest in your kids, like that was for one of my kids, it was the whole Henry Huggins series. And I paid him to read the book. I paid him to read the first book because he wasn't a reader. He wasn't a voracious reader. And I wanted to have a reader. Like I want my kids to read. And they're boys. And like I said, they can't sit still. You know, they really had a hard time. And I was just like, if I could just get them interested in reading, then a whole new world is going to open for them. And that was my goal. And I was going to take whatever, you know, path it took to get there. And I knew like putting like The Secret Garden in front of him for his first book and like being like, read this or else, you know, that wasn't going to do it, you know? So we tried a few things. Like, I mean, they read through the, like the Magic Tree House books, you know, like those little chapter books. But when we started to want to get like into bigger, you know, like getting into those novels, that's how I started. I said, I'll give you $5 if you finish this book. And I started with a series, the first book of a series, because then at the end of the book, I was like, I could give you the $5 or I'll buy you the next book. And they've all, and like once they were hooked on book one, I don't remember if like they were always hooked on book one of like that series, but I gave them the $5 and then we went to another series. And then, but there was always for my 3 boys that are like readers now, it started with that first one. And I didn't care, you know, so for one kid, it was Henry Huggins, that whole series. I think there were like 6 books, best $30 I ever spent, you know, because now I have a reader. And then, I don't know, like my third one reading The Wild Robot, like he's read all 3 and, you know, and he went through it fast and he was so excited to go get the next book. So I don't know, like I don't know. I've never felt like strongly about, I've never felt guilty for giving my kids something that others consider twaddle because there's other benefits than just what the living ideas they're getting from it.
Would you say that your kids naturally transitioned into, I don't want to say higher quality, but like a deeper quality?
Living books.
Living books. You know, did they transfer their affections to those also?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Like
I think that's something parents need to hear because idea that if you give them twaddle, that's all they'll want. Living books, right? But we
absolutely
we call them dinner and dessert books in our house.
Yeah.
We categorize books by dinner and dessert, and we love balance. You should always be able to enjoy dessert, but sometimes you have to eat dinner first. So we call dinner books like biographies and things, and often they'll end up reading, like I just stack the shelves with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and if they go to the library, they have to have a balance. For every 2 dessert books, they have to have 1 dinner book. And we just kind of cycle through that way.
I don't do that.
We did it for the first probably year, and then we never had to again.
Yeah.
Right now I have a 13-year-old devouring the 39 Clues books. And I love it.
Check those out.
Because, it's by, I think it's Rick Riordan.
Oh, yes.
Right?
We love his,
he's an amazing writer. But in the 39 Clues book that my son is reading right now, so far he's been introduced to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and I think it's his sister. And I didn't know anything about his sister. So I had to go Google and read up. They used a bunch of the characters are named after presidents. So I was like, so do you know where these names came from? And then we went down this. We have done so much learning while we're not doing school this summer, reading those books because his curiosity has been sparked. And I think that's the appeal of Charlotte Mason, but we couldn't stick with just Charlotte Mason. So for like you, I think we're kind of eclectic. That's where we settled fast. And like I said, my personal, when I was a kid, I would have chosen classical education for myself.
Yeah.
Like that was how I liked learning. So we do, we use Are the Moments at home curriculum for the younger grades. But when they get to junior high and high school, we go deeper and more expansive. And we do classical for history. We do Charlotte Mason stuff for like literature and English language arts, right? We use Spark Schooling for our gym, our art, our music, all through elementary schools, our supplements. And then when they get to high school, I let them choose what they've learned and been exposed to pursue. Most of my kids have gone down the art path. One has chosen music, and he just learned piano and percussion, and now he's learning guitar. And, when it comes to science, that's kind of the one where we don't really pick a style, right? Like we found a curriculum. I love Apologia's high school curriculum for science. One of my kids did marine biology. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's
right.
Fun.
But
that's
like
fun.
they weren't hammered into it. We kind of, they knew what they liked to learn and how they liked to learn because we did all the things when they were younger.
Yeah.
And so as they got older, we're like, okay, so now you know this about yourself. Now you know what resonates with you, what you learn best with. Let's create a high school plan for you that you can love. And so electives might be what unschoolers term unschooling. History, like I said, we've always gone classical. All my kids have preferred that style of history, which is great. It's really interesting to me how giving them these choices gives them ownership. And I think that seeing our graduates, they're now tailoring their adult learning to their individualized styles and thinking about their careers, taking what they've learned about this. So this is so much more important than just like which table you sit at a homeschool gathering.
Right.
But it feels so scary to not know which table to sit at.
It does.
Right? Like,
sit at the eclectic one now. Like save yourself the stress.
Okay, the next time you're at a homeschooling event, start an eclectic table.
There you go. Just start there.
Everyone who's listening to this, start an eclectic table. I think something, though, that I want to highlight from what you said, there is a difference between looking at these philosophies and pulling the root, the method, the heart and soul out of it and using it as a prescription for every aspect of your homeschool or your life. Because if you really look at, actually, Rachel, you said this in a conversation we had the other day that like these people who were such innovators in education, the people who developed Waldorf, developed Charlotte Mason, developed Thomas Jefferson, they were cutting edge people.
They were kind of like
rebels.
the rebels.
Yeah, they were. And they lit fires in people who were like, wait a minute, we can release this. We can integrate, we can bring new things in. So I feel like there's also, I understand the draw to being a purist because it gives you a roadmap. You know what
it gives
to
you
do.
An identity.
You've got something. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like a solid
and a community.
Like, I know. And a community.
There's often
That's
a community.
A big one.
It is.
That's a big one.
And it's valid. It is a valid.
Absolutely.
Like I have friends in our area that are, in classical conversations and that, it is a community and they stick together, and it's great. It's kind of like CrossFit for,
Yeah. Actually, that's a really great analogy.
It really is.
Yeah. But I do think, I think, there is a difference in that you don't like it. Cause here's the thing. If you're reading, cause you had said Charlotte Mason books, if you pick up a book that is on a list that Charlotte Mason recommended, but you give your child a test on the book, and if you have them, bubble answers or, if the way you approach that actual book is not in alignment with the heart and soul of the method, it doesn't matter that you're reading the Charlotte Mason book. The same as if you pick another book that is rich and full of ideas, but you implement the ideas of narration and, time to integrate it and all of those things. I think sometimes we get confused that like, you can love and be drawn to the Charlotte Mason. We were talking a lot about Charlotte Mason, but this can be said for anything. Right. My sister, the way she's raising her baby right now, I'm like, you don't know this, but you're already Waldorf. Like you're already going that way.
Yeah.
There is a soul. I think the reason these things have stood the test of time is because there's a soul behind them. Like there is something that speaks to an inner part of people. And that if you understand and you utilize that, it's not so much about the trappings that go with it. You can still be that. One of the things I love about Charlotte Mason is that she's like, the foundation of the entire method is that children are born persons. They're full, whole people. I think it's really funny because I also feel like that is at the root of the unschooling movement.
Yep.
They're full, whole people.
I see that there are so many correlations and between those two methods in particular. Even with like the, Charlotte Mason has the spreading the feast, and unschooling has strewing. Like they're not the same, and I'm not saying that they are the same, but they are similar, and
but there are things that work.
And that's why that's why they're in both methods. It's because they work. And so it's these ideas, these general ideas of things that have stood the test of time, things that work, things that draw in the whole child, and get the whole child on board, learning with all the different styles, all the different resources. The living books are full of ideas. The unschoolers are using living books too, because where else are they getting that information? You have to get it from there. So it's like these things that are integrated in each of these methods are the same things. They're integrated in different ways. Different weight is put on different things. Now, I know some like the methodology is different, or the order that you would go in is different. I know like with classical, you're not going to give certain ideas to kids until they get to a certain age. And, but we're like you said at the beginning, Allie, it is all about developing the whole child. Like that's what's at the heart of it, is getting these kids to become like lifelong learners and to really know who they are and be educated in the best way that that works for them.
Empowering that is, right? Like saying, hey, we're going to start this journey this way, and we're not going to be afraid to pivot. Like we're not so married to an ideology that we're divorced from your success. Like that's important. And teaching our kids that, to advocate for themselves, to try new ways, to do new things. Before I ever knew who Waldorf was, for some reason that wasn't one I studied early on. We really adopted that. My kids we've always kept a stepladder in the kitchen so they could climb up and help cook and wash dishes and things, because my aunt had one in her kitchen and I did that there. And it was like some of my happiest childhood memories. We've always done that with the kids. We've always given them real things if there's an option to do that, as opposed to a toy version of the thing.
Yeah.
And they love it. But when I look at Montessori, when I look at Waldorf, I love Maria Montessori's ideas. Love, love, love them. I'm reading a book right now about her philosophies, and it's just so fascinating. And what's funny is I actually think that if she were to innovate today, like if a new generation of Montessori came out, right, there would probably be coding and all kinds of electronic stuff in there that is left out of that because of when the lifestyle was created, right? I
think the same thing. I think Charlotte Mason would have STEM.
Exactly.
STEM would be foundational if Charlotte Mason was alive today.
That's why we have to take the principles, but the application can adapt. And that's why when you said, Allie, in the beginning, we'd get to that purist thing, maybe because I'm a rebel, I don't know. I've never been able to totally conform. I've never been able to pick one and say, I'm going to do that. But I love taking the ideas and going, okay, what principle does that give us? I think I first learned how to do that, or felt empowered to do that, when I encountered Brave Writer with Julie Bogart. She really, like, poetry tea time was so liberating for us. We never stuck to poetry. We still had to make it our own, right? Like we just couldn't do that. But I had kids reading graphic novels out loud because they liked the wordplay. Or, reading a passage. Danita K. Paul wrote this Dragon Keeper's Chronicles. If your kids haven't read those, they're amazing. They're so well written. But the kids would bring passages and read out loud a description of a dragon's egg. And they're like, just look at these words. You can like feel it and see it. You can smell the air, and they learn to appreciate words. Charlotte Mason would have loved that. Yeah. Absolutely loved that. Even if some of the books that we were using would not have started on her original lists. But the principle and the heart was there, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you both have said you're rebels, which is why you're not a purist, where like which I think we are all three rebels in some ways, but it's the people who I know who are purists who are doing it and they live counterculturally.
Mm-hmm.
They do it because they're rebels too.
I know. It is so
Isn't that
interesting.
it's fascinating because they're looking
Yep.
at like we don't
Homeschoolers
want
are
what the
rebels.
current
Well, true. We're all
it's true. Just
counterculture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting what that different interpretation is. And that's, again, I go back to, you know, having a base knowledge of all these different options and moving forward with the things that really resonate with you and your family and the mission that's laid on your heart for your family, I think is the direction. But you know, the purists who sit at the table and light the candle and do all the things,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so beautiful.
It is.
It's so beautiful. And when I see their kids at the park whittling instead of, you know, having
awesome.
their technology or whatever,
Yeah.
I think that's
I
so
love it.
special and so wonderful. But it is funny because I think on both sides of it, it's because I don't want to be told what to do. It's just who you don't want to be told what to do by, which is just interesting to me.
Yeah, what and it's a lot. Favorite books or resources that have taught you about these different methodologies?
Oh, I was like, are you asking me a general question about my favorite books?
Like
I know, like how long do we have? How much time do I've got a whole bookshelf.
That's a 10-part series. I know, right? Like
look at this. Books. And my entire living room is all books. Okay, so I'm a big proponent of listening to the words of the people that actually developed the methods. Mm-hmm. So I have read the words, the speeches of people who've actually developed it, even so far as going back to Socrates and Cicero and, you know, and reading their words about education. I mean, I would say every single one of these methods also has really great books about them that have been written that are beautiful and give you such a great understanding of what it looks and feels like. But I personally love to hear the words. I'm going to swing the pendulum here, but even so far as like current institutional schooling, like your neighborhood school, right? Mm-hmm. There were a few people who are very predominantly involved in the development of those types of schools. Mm-hmm. The people in Prussia, the people here in the United States, like Horace Mann, I have gone and read their actual speeches and what they said about what those meant, because I think it's like a game of telephone otherwise. So I really like to go back and listen.
So which ones would you recommend?
For each method?
No, just like one or two that really popped for you. If our listeners are looking, like what are one or two?
Well, Allie, I feel like has done a deep dive on everything.
She's read it all.
So I don't know, and I haven't gone. I'm not level of Allie, but I utilize the internet and go through, just to get like a summary of what are Charlotte Mason's beliefs, what are the principles, what were the principles there. Also, like B.F. Skinner, like educational and psychology and all of that, like the philosophy there. And like you said, Horace Mann, I had to, I learned about in school. And so it's like all these ideas that we take from all these different places can really be helpful in determining our own personal, and then also what works for us, So, I don't know. I would, I don't have any books either that I just would say jump off. That would give a general idea, because I think that you need to go, like you said, back to the source. And even if you're not reading all the books and doing the deep dives that Allie does, just a general Google search of like, what did this person say? What did this person believe? Can get you started down that path of understanding the different methods and the why behind the methods. Like, what is the goal of this method or of this philosophy of education? And, one thing that was, although I will give a specific thing that was really instrumental for me, that I was just like, yes, this is what I'm going for, is Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk on Do Schools Kill Creativity? he was a really big proponent for that public schools needed to be totally transformed. They couldn't be reformed at this point. Like they had to be transformed. And his idea of eliminating the hierarchy of the subject areas, and that each subject, it plays an integral role in developing the whole person. I think that he would have been a fantastic homeschool dad, but because he just had all of these ideas that we and values that we have as homeschoolers, and the reason that we homeschool, a lot of us homeschool. But I think that was a really good one that solidified, like, and wrapped. I was able to wrap my head around what I believed more after listening to him, and I was like, yes, that's what I'm after. So, I don't know. That was one that really helped me. Not a specific person, but like a method, but just something in general.
I loved that TED Talk so much. As you're talking, I'm thinking too, another way to go about this. The two questions that I feel like give you the best frame of context as for what a method is are what does that person or the method, what do they believe about children? What do they believe in general about children? And then the second one is, how do they define education? Because I feel like at the root of those, I'm writing a book right now, and now I'm thinking I'm writing this book too about the different methods. But I looked up the definition of education, like in the dictionary definition of education. And it's fascinating because the first definition, there's always, not always, but there's multiple definitions. The first one right now essentially says that it's an institution you move through and you complete tasks and you get to the other side of, right?
What?
In the form of schools. Yeah. Like that's something that happens at schools. To say I disagree with that would be the understatement of the year. But then the second definition was that it is something that transforms you. It's like a transformative, enlightening experience. And I think that understanding how each of these methods define what an education is and what they believe about children, I feel like those two questions will either light up your soul or that you'll feel an instant repel to. So when you're just getting started, if you're on the Google search, just getting started, those are the two things I'd look at, because every single one of these methods does have, the person who founded it, you will be able to find the answers to those two questions, and it'll tell you so much about whether or not that method resonates with you.
See, I love that. The reason I asked you that question is because when I got started, I asked people for resources, and everyone said basically what you did. Oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. For new homeschooling moms or moms just starting out, that's so overwhelming. So to simplify it, somebody handed me a book called Educating the Wholehearted Child. It's by Clay and Sally Clarkson. It is from a perspective of faith and family discipleship as part of your homeschooling journey. But it summarized the various methods, and it gave me a comfort level. So I didn't feel out of my depth when I was talking with other parents, when I was getting new ideas thrown at me and new philosophies thrown at me, because everybody that tosses them your way is like, this is the right way, right? Everybody's throwing it toward you because it's so good to them that they want you to enjoy it too. And you're like, because you're trying to, like, it feels like a game of dodgeball with ideas, or at least that's how I felt in the beginning. And that really helped me. And the well-trained mind was instrumental in helping me understand how my kids learned and what realistic expectations I could set for each stage of mental development.
I really did appreciate that book too. Especially the suggestions in the back for each subject area, for each, age level. I did really appreciate that, and wasn't planning on going the classical route, really from the beginning, but I appreciated that aspect of it.
It's still
for
really
sure.
Valuable.
It is very valuable.
And then How Children Learn by John Holt.
Yes,
that's a great book. That is a
great one. Another thing that I have families do when they're just getting started, and this is so hokey, but if you're looking at this and you're like, I'm so overwhelmed. One of the homeschool method quizzes that's out there. You can go online and take a quiz, and they'll ask you, and there's some that are better than others. I'll send a few to put in the show notes.
Some are definitely geared to lead you to a certain, yes. So don't take them on the curriculum site of a certain curriculum that has that has a certain philosophy.
Yeah, because they'll
I've been there.
All the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and the way they ask the questions,
yes.
you're like, well, this is the only right one, right?
Right, exactly.
But there are some good ones out there, and I think that can also just give you a starting place, like just a place to begin.
And I don't think, I don't think that it's wrong to be a purist in any of these things as well. So I think that when you're, because I know none of us are purists. And so, but I don't think any of us would say, you're going to become eclectic eventually. Like that's like almost seems like a challenge to somebody who really wants to be a purist. They're like, oh, just watch me be Charlotte Mason for life. I think that if, that method really resonates, or whatever method really resonates with you and really works for you and your kids, then go for it. I think that's the whole takeaway here, is that these different styles, these different methods, that they're all geared towards helping you teach your kids and your whole child, right? Like teaching them, getting them to love learning, getting them to, and it might focus on a different thing, like just focusing on loving literature, living books and all of that, loving the exploration, loving nature, loving, like they go about it in different ways. And if you are all in on one thing, you're going to end up with great kids, because you have your best children, your children's best interests at heart here. And that's totally okay. I think the only danger that I would say is that if something isn't working, and it's a resource that in that method, everyone says like, this one is this method or this resource that you should use, and it's not working, but you are holding fast to the method or to the style of homeschooling, and it's not working, and you're afraid to change at that point, that's the only time that being a purist, like it might be okay to explore different opportunities. Oh, you've got something to say, Allie.
I got something to say. None of these methods actually have a curriculum. Like aside from Charlotte Mason, who you can read her book, and she has the timetables that were used in her schools, and then they have the articles for the parents. But even with that, it was a guide.
Yeah.
There is not a curriculum. There is not. So not really. Not when you go back to the root of these places.
But if you are, researching like, how do I do classical?
100%. But I think this is why, if you are going to go all in one area, you need to be reading about the heart and the soul of it and where it came from, so that you have such an intrinsic understanding that you are not going to be trapped by the trappings of modern times.
Yeah.
Because I've seen all kinds of curriculum that purport themselves, like say that they're one, but then I'm like, this does not make any sense. Like the person who developed this method would never do X, Y, and Z within this context.
Yeah.
So you have got to, if you're going all in, I am classical, I am Waldorf, I am whatever it is, get the audiobooks, listen to the podcast, get the original speeches, and know what you're talking about, so you don't get stuck.
Yeah.
Because that's what can happen. It's beautiful to be a purist if you're a purist in the intention that was set for that method, not in a rigidity that doesn't allow for the development of your child. That's where it gets to be such a hot mess.
Yes. Well, and also
I like
like
you said, rigidity.
Yeah,
that's a good word for what it can be.
Yeah.
The curriculum designers, any curriculum designer is going to have strengths and weaknesses, as far as what their, a lot of curriculum out there tries to cover all the subjects, but they really are good at like one thing. And I find that one of the areas that like people are weaker in, like curriculum developers are weaker in, are the arts, because it's hard to teach those things. And so when they're like, oh, it's easy, here's our method, and I've shared this before, but like, listen to this music and that's good enough, like that's not, or follow this, composer study guide, that we put together. and they're just like checking boxes. Like so it could be anything. That's just the one that gets me. I'm sorry. Like music education is my thing. But if it becomes like a checkbox, so you are achieving the points of this curriculum, I've seen people say, or heard people say, well, yeah, we can do, we can learn about, we can follow the listening maps and we can do these things, but that's not Charlotte Mason or whatever. And like, in order to do Charlotte Mason, you have to just listen to, do it this one way to check the boxes. And I'm like, no. That's not like, it's that rigidity that you were talking about. Like if you're just doing it to check the boxes, but it's not like your kids are not enjoying it and it's not like actually teaching them anything, then that's when you need to evaluate, is this resource the best one for achieving what the original intent of this method was? Does that make sense?
But I think
following like what you're saying.
I mean, like I create curriculum, right? And we create a comprehensive curriculum. But my intention when we got to the table and I started working with curriculum designers and childhood development specialists and educators and started really rehashing everything, because we're actually in a huge upheaval where we're restructuring things and we're tweaking and fine-tuning. And it's funny because on the front end, our parents will probably not even realize, the thousands of hours that have gone into this behind the scenes, because our goal is to make it so easy to use, which is what all of our tools are supposed to be. That's why we use tools, right? To help it be easy. But our philosophy in our home, which is, bleeding into our business, is that education, like that sit down academic time, is only meant to be the diving board. And the rest of it, like the library and life and experiences, is the pool that they swim in. And so my intention is that our curriculum is their springboard. And then they get to jump in to the world of learning.
Yes.
And go
does
as deep and as far and as wide as they want. And so when we look at these curriculum and say, well, I'm using a Charlotte Mason curriculum, or I'm using a Montessori curriculum, or I'm using a classical curriculum. And so we've checked these boxes and now we're done with school for the day.
Right.
You're doing your kids a disservice. And all of these styles, they're, as Allie pointed out in the beginning, they're lifestyles. They're about the whole child. Yeah. And sadly, because of marketing, because of business, because we like to check boxes and fit in boxes, it's too much as a society. We've made them badges that we earn during part of our day, because there's this idea that school happens between 8:30 and 2:30 every day. And when our kids sit at the kitchen table, this is the style of learning we ascribe to. But my goal is for my kids to sit down as little as possible. Let's get math out of the way. Let's get your textbook stuff done. Let's finish science. Let's finish history. Let's finish literature for the day. And then let's go apply all of these things. Let's explore all of these things. Let's have big, rousing debates about topics. Let's have discussions. Let's, not just read about Da Vinci, but try to create our own machine at home.
I've got someone downstairs doing that right now.
Me too.
It really?
To the museum building the catapult.
That's what right now downstairs. The catapult.
We're sitting at the table with it. So right, funny. But let's do that. And that's where it really becomes a part of who they are. And that's where the lifestyle comes in.
Charlotte Mason and John Holt both say something very similar to that. John Holt says something about how John Holt says that I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something about like, you have to do it. Like there's no just like learning, like you have to go and do it in order to learn it. I can't remember the exact quote. And Charlotte Mason has she said something about like anything else is like a veneer, if you're not like doing the thing, if you're just learning it to learn it, it's just a veneer that's laid on their heart. And she says it very poetically and beautifully, but they're both like the same kind of ideas. Like if your kids are not doing and applying what they're learning, then it's a waste of time, because it doesn't sink in. It's not authentic learning. And what I love about this conversation is that we've all like just pulled out like all of these different methods of getting there, of giving them these ideas. Like you said, the diving board. Yes. Like it's a diving board. Let's start there, but then don't be afraid to let your kids swim. And, like, don't just hang out on the pool deck. We're going to jump in and we're going to allow them to go, and all the methods have different ways of doing that, but they all do it if you're willing to go and do it. You know, like if you're willing to let them jump in and swim, they all go there.
I think another thing too, though, is that you can't rely so heavily on a method. You know how they say exercise can't outwork a horrible diet, right? Like if it's the same kind of thing. You can, even if you're a purist, but you yourself, I know this sucks, but you yourself are not modeling and living that lifestyle, and you're not diving in deeper, and you're not that we have to do everything our children are doing or get excited about every rabbit hole that they're in. But if we're not living a life of, you know,
curiosity,
reading books, curiosity, learning new things, and it doesn't have to be, you're listening to 3 bibliophiles right now who love books. It doesn't have to be books, but
you know, you're willing to go figure out how to
solely on the method. This is something that needs to be, you need to be immersed in it yourself as well, so that it's not a veneer. Because if we're not leading, if we're not modeling this life, it's never going to get to that penetrative place.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Thank you so much for joining us as we have jumped into the deep water of the different homeschool methods and styles. Please engage with us over on Instagram. We would love to hear your thoughts on this topic and hear what you have to say, hear your unique perspective. And as always, it is your family, your homeschool. And we hope that this conversation today has helped you in just giving you some new ideas, some new perspectives to explore and solidifying some perspectives that you already hold. So we will see you next time here. Have a great one until then.